আমন্ত্রণ জানাচ্ছি চ্যানেল 24 এর নিটুল টাটা মুখোমুখিতে। আজকে আমরা কথা বলবো কানাডার প্রধানমন্ত্রীর মিয়ানমার বিষয়ক বিশেষ দূত জনাব ববরের সাথে। ওয়েলকাম টু দ্য শো।
Thank you so much.
So you had an experience and you made a report. We are all human, if I'm not wrong. Tell me about your experience and when you have done the investigation. You went to Myanmar, you came to Bangladesh, you talked to a lot of people.
Yeah, the Prime Minister asked me, based on my previous experiences in Myanmar, I've been doing some work for an organization called the Forum of Federations, which looks at plural political structures and how to deal with conflict. So the Prime Minister knew about this work, and he asked me if I would take on this mission, which I said I would do. I've traveled to, first of all, traveled to the camp. The first visit was in the fall, in autumn, in October, and late October, early November. I was struck by just how deplorable the conditions in the camp were, how tough they are. I've been to many other camps in other places in other parts of the world, but never anything quite like this. And I came away from that with a deep sense of concern about the camp itself, the conditions in the camp, as well as conversations with people in the camp, their experiences about how they were traumatized, their villages were burnt, they were the subject of rape, they saw their children being killed and parents being killed. Many stories, many allegations. And one of the stories was a conversation I had with a man who went through and told me his situation. And then he before I left, he grabbed me and he said, "Tell them we're human. Tell them our story. Tell them we're human."
How was your feeling at that particular moment of time when he grabbed you?
Oh, it was very emotional. We were both crying. He was crying. I was crying. It was a very emotional situation. You can't deal with the problems and challenges that you face in a camp like this without feeling emotion, as well as a lot of resilience. Kids playing, children learning, children going to classes. We have 3-4 sessions of 2 hours each where you get as many children in a classroom as possible. So the people working in the camp are doing a heroic job. I came back again in March and was struck by the improvements. They had a lot of work to do on infrastructure, roads, sanitation, improving the conditions in the camp. And there's been a marked improvement, but on this last visit, even more improvements, but we have the problem of the rains. And a huge worry that the rains are going to bring landslides, disease, and loss of life. And that's really the worry that I've had. In the course of my work, of course, I've gone to Myanmar several times, visited with Aung San Suu Kyi, visited with members of the cabinet, government, military. They have a very different story, which is one that, as an envoy, I have to listen to and try to understand and try to figure out the truth from fiction. Yeah. And then I've had several meetings here, of course, in Bangladesh with government officials, met with other foreign ministers in other countries in the region, because fundamentally we believe there has to be a regional response. It can't just be on the shoulders of the Bangladeshis. And as a Canadian, people will say, well, why are you here? Like, well, you're far away, you have no connection, so why are you here? So we have to work with a number of other countries to make this work, which is why I've come this week to meet with the Islamic community foreign ministers and to meet again with the foreign secretary, the foreign minister here. We met yesterday with the prime minister. And I think over time, I think people realize that we're serious, that we have a plan, we're working through with other people, we have ideas about what can be done. And I think people understand that as a Canadian initiative, we're very serious about this.
So it's time for a break. After this break, we'll come back and talk about more on this particular issue. তো আলোচনার এই পর্যায়ে একটা বিরতি নিচ্ছি, সাথেই থাকুন, ফিরছি একটু পর। আমন্ত্রণ মুখোমুখিতে। নিরল টাটা, আজকে মুখোমুখিতে আমরা কথা বলবো বব রে, কানাডার প্রধানমন্ত্রী বিশেষ দূত মিয়ানমার বিষয়ক, তার সাথে। Welcome to the show once again.
Thank you so much.
When you had a meeting with Aung San Suu Kyi and other leaders from the Myanmar side and as well as the militaries, did they really feel this is their made crisis? It's not our crisis. We're trying to solve it. Not even we made it. Do they have such realization or they have some rejection?
It's complicated. I don't think it's a simple formula. I think the reality is that there has been a long-standing view inside Myanmar, not just of one person or one general or a few people, that the Rohingya are not really part of the Myanmar family. They're not really part of the citizenship structure of the country. And steadily over time, over the last 60, 70 years, they've been reducing the space in the Myanmar political family for the Rohingya. You see a steady diminution of their rights, a steady limitation on their ability to move, their ability to get around, go to school, go to university, get professionally accredited. These things have slowly but surely been whittled away. And it hasn't been done by accident, but it has been done
intentionally.
It's very intentional, it's very purposeful, and it's intended to limit and restrict the ability of the Rohingya to survive. And so when you had the conflict, which led to the retaliation, which then led to the departure, the forcible deportation, as I call it, you have to see it in a context of a long history of discrimination. And that, I think, is the challenge. But, I mean, Aung San Suu Kyi did ask Kofi Annan to bring in his report. She did ask him to tell her what should be done. He made a report, and as we know, the day that his report came out was the day that the conflict, the last round of conflict started. And
so in a way, they were waiting for the report, right?
well, you know, they were, but there's lots of theories, you know. I mean, everywhere I go, in Bangladesh here, everywhere, there's different ideas, theories as to what really happened. To me, the important thing to understand is that, yes, there is a militancy within a group of the Rohingya called ARSA. That exists. It's there. Yes, there was a conflict. And yes, there was a brutal retaliation which led to the departure, the killing, and the rape, and to the departure of 700,000 people in the space of 4 weeks. So those are the facts that we know. Beyond those facts, we still have work to do to get to the deeper determination of what happened.
How do you see the role of regional leaders on this particular issue? Are they active or they passive, or they're not just?
Well, it's like everything else. I mean, there are divisions, right? I mean, they're as an outsider, I suppose I shouldn't say, but ASEAN is not completely united on this. There are different countries have different perspectives and views. A lot of it has to do with the ethnic makeup of the country. I would say that Indonesia, for example, has been particularly constructive because Indonesia is a pluralist country. Indonesia is a country that is Muslim, so it is Islamic, but it is also plural. And it has much in common with Bangladesh because they understand each other. Because Bangladesh is also a complicated country with many different groups. It is Islamic, yes, but it does it in its own way. Then you have countries like Thailand with a big Buddhist majority, and they will have a different perspective. They're the immediate neighbors. But there is still a key need, I think, for ASEAN, for the regional players to come together. And the two biggest players that need to play a role are India and China, because they are clearly big investors in Myanmar, but they are also big investors and partners in Bangladesh. So, and I've talked about this very openly with the leaders of Bangladesh and said, you know, we need to involve India and China in finding solutions because they understand that although Myanmar likes to say this is just a local issue, this is our business, stay away.
Yeah.
The reality is the conflict has been internationalized of the fact that you have 1 million people over the years, the last 30 years, who have been forced to come here. And so there has to be a regional response to that.
So it's time for a break. After this break, we'll come back and talk about more on this particular issue. তো আলোচনার এই পর্যায়ে একটা বিরতি নিচ্ছি, সাথেই থাকুন, ফিরছি একটু পর। আমন্ত্রণ মুখোমুখিতে। নিরল টাটা। আজকে মুখোমুখিতে আমরা কথা বলবো বব রে, কানাডার প্রধানমন্ত্রীর বিশেষ দূত মিয়ানমার বিষয়ক, তার সাথে। Welcome to the show once again.
Thank you so much.
It's been
I think there's an active discussion in Myanmar, in the political society. And don't forget, Myanmar government is complicated. You have a military wing, which is established. They have 25% of the control of parliament. They control 3 major ministries, which are responsible for defense, security, all internal matters affecting the country. But I'm a big believer that you take them. The civilian government led by Aung San Suu Kyi has made it very clear that she accepts the Annan report. She accepts the principle that people should be able to come back. They say they want to repatriate. They're trying to build an infrastructure that will allow it to happen. But as we all know, it's not the infrastructure, furniture, people, houses. It's the infrastructure in your heart.
right.
And it's the infrastructure in your head that matters. And the problem is that there's a toxic political environment which makes it very difficult for us to be able to promise, to say, absolutely, when you go back, you will be treated well. And it requires some political change. There has to be an implementation of the Annan Commission, which, again, to be specific, says there has to be a path to citizenship, which has to be clear and unimpeded. There has to be a clear acceptance of the rights of the Rohingya to live where they're living, to make a living, to be able to participate politically. They were excluded from even voting in the last election. They had no rights to participate. When the country was born in 1948, there were members of the Rohingya community who were in the cabinet. You had judges who were Rohingya. You had people, politicians, members of the National Assembly and so on, who were Rohingya. Being a Muslim in Rakhine State was not, everyone understood that there was a presence there. That is what has changed, and we have to find a way back, and it's very difficult in the current political environment.
And all this change being done intentionally? Do you think all this change being done intentionally?
What the changes?
The changes, I mean, they are out of the cabinet, they are out of the constitution.
Yeah, of course. Quite intentional. I mean, let's not forget that overall, after the creation of Burma, Burma was part of the British Empire. It was there was no border or boundary between Bengal and Burma. So there was a movement of population over many hundreds of years back and forth. No question. Of course that happened. But the determination to create the conditions of citizenship and to limit the size of what I call the political family in Burma and in Myanmar has been a very steady process. Who were forced back. They had many positions in business and the professions and so on. They were told, no, you've got to go back. You're not part of the setup here. What's different about the Rohingya, though, is that they actually jobs, lived lives, had farms, rural people based in the countryside. These were not lawyers who came across to practice law in Burma for a generation. No, these were people who made their living. This was their home, and this is their home. When you talk to the Rohingya in the camp, they talk about home. They want to go home, and it's not somewhere else. They do not see themselves as Bengalis. That's not their identity. And if you talk to Bangladeshis, they don't think. They say, oh, the Rohingya, they're just like us. They say, no, they're different. They speak a different dialect. They have a different culture. They have a culture which has grown up in Rakhine State.
দর্শক, আমরা আলোচনা করছিলাম কানাডার প্রধানমন্ত্রীর মিয়ানমার বিষয়ক বিশেষ দূত ববরের সাথে। মুখোমুখির আজকের আলোচনা এখানে শেষ। দেখা হবে আগামী পর্বে। এই আলোচনা চলতে থাকবে। ততক্ষণ ভালো থাকুন, সুস্থ থাকুন।